Alright, we've got our clay all dried up. Hopefully you can see that a little bit better against the paper background. But this stuff, as I said before, I mean, it's dried on here, it is bonded, it's hard as a rock. It's a great way to create all of the additional ridges and detail and texture. I think I mentioned before, I'm not overly concerned with the style that I'm working with on getting this paper clay as smooth as possible. Depending on what you're doing, obviously if you want a much smoother texture and you want to be able to work with it more, make sure that you blend those fibers up as much as possible. Just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. It's going to get down to a very, very fine slurry, and that's how you get to work with all the detailing when it comes to the clay. For me, for what I'm working with on this, and it just depends on your project, as raggedy and as raw as it looks, that's what I'm going for, because I want as much texture as I can possibly get out of this. As you can see, went ahead and worked that all the way around. Just highlighted the eyes, made some ridges, took this piece that just dead-ended into the pumpkin head and brought it on around to make it look like it is a continuing vine. At this point, now that it's hard and dry, we're going to go ahead and empty the inside and get everything out so that we've got a hollow pumpkin. And get all this pulled out, I'll be back right with you. Okay, now that you've got all of the paper out and emptied, the only thing that you should be left with is going to be your plastic bag and your strings that you applied to it. Because we use the handle to help make up the stem, that's the only part that's left attached. So all I'm going to do is take a pair of dikes, reach in there and just cut it off at the base as close to the paper as I possibly can, and that'll be it. That should leave you with a hollow pumpkin. Looks like I got one piece of string left in here. And now you can get a better feel for how the face actually looks. This brings us down to one of my favorite steps for a couple reasons. First off, it signifies the final stage of the actual build before we go to seal and paint this thing, and it's the stage that brings this thing completely together, and it adds a lot more texture. And if you haven't figured out, I'm all about the texture, because the more texture you have, the more you're going to get out of your dry brushing and painting this, and the more detail. It makes it look like you put a lot more effort than what you really have into this. For this final stage, for the skinning of this, all you're going to need is your container with your glue and water mixture, just like you did on the paper mache. And the material that I found that works best is just your ordinary, cheap, brown paper towel. There's a lot of other stuff that you could probably use. You could probably use regular paper towel. Not used it. The only thing I'd be concerned with on the regular paper towel is all of that funky embossing that they do, the little flowers and all that stuff, because I'm sure that's going to end up coming through on your final piece, and I really don't want that. What I've done is I've just taken pieces and ripped them off. I've also ripped down the edge of it, just like on the newspaper. I don't want that factory cut. One thing I have done in the past that has helped, especially when I'm making a bunch of these and need a lot of this, so I'm not tearing a bunch, is when you have this full roll, is just take a palm sander with some rough sandpaper and go over the whole top of this and the bottom, and that roughs up and gets rid of this factory cut and makes things real easy. Then you can just pull off and tear as you need to. I've also taken a skill saw and have cut this roll in half as well before, so I didn't have to go and tear all the pieces off. It tears it all up on its own when you go to cut it. Works pretty good. But for this case, all I did was just roll it off, tear it, stack it, and tear the ends. All you're going to do with this, just like the paper mache, we're going to stick it in the glue and water mixture. It absorbs it really quickly. You can see I'm using much larger pieces than what I did before, and just going to shake it off a little bit. We're just going to stick it on. Not worried about getting this smooth at all. We want all these wrinkles and ridges, tears, and everything else in this. So again, just going to lay it on. Going to make sure that it's shoved down to the surface. And by the way, this creates such a cool look with this brown paper towel. When it dries, after being wet like this, it almost creates a translucent kind of skin. I've been very tempted in the past to do nothing more than seal this and not even paint it after this stage because it looks so cool and the color that you get out of it. I have not done that. I'm sure one of these days I will on some kind of project and just leave this brown paper towel on its own. Only thing I do warn you, if you are going to do that, make sure you have a couple layers on because you will see the newsprint through it, and that's not going to look so cool. Again, just laying this on any which way, doesn't really matter. You're going to wrap it around in the mouth. I don't want this thing real smooth. I want all those wrinkles that it's going to create. And as you can see, this is just a nice final stage and ties everything together. And this stuff tears real easy. You get into a situation where it's just not working, who cares? Just shove it down and around and tear it into position. And that's what I'll do on the eyes and the mouth. I'll drip it over all of these teeth and just shove it in and around and tear it. One thing and I did do this on one head before, and it's a very, very cool look, is I just draped this after I had everything covered. I just draped it and then just started pulling and tearing it and just leaving those tears. And I even did it across the mouth. I had it on and just left those pieces hanging and just tore them, and it just created such a cool shredded kind of like decayed look to the pumpkin head. I just loved it. I'd like to do that again sometime. That even more of a dramatic effect with it. And you could also, one thing you could do too is you could take these paper towels, you can wad them up, you can create, if you see an area that's kind of dull and you want some extra veining in it and some more texture, just roll this thing, wad it up, stick it on, and just lay another piece right over the top of it. Real easy way to create some additional veining. So here's where I've got it in the mouth, and I'm just going to tear it around these teeth. Really don't care if I don't get all the detail out of that tooth or not. This stuff, once it's wet with this glue and water mixture, tears very easy. And if you have to, you can always turn this back around and work from the inside to get that to lay flat. I'm just going to push in the eyes, tear that opening up. And this step goes really quickly. Alright, now that you've had an opportunity to apply your brown paper towel all over your pumpkin, as well as let it dry. One thing to note, I did hang this to dry. You're again adding a lot of moisture back to this, and now with the inside being removed, had I just left this set to dry, then I run the risk of this wanting to collapse around this mouth area. Again, that's not a bad thing. I've got a pumpkin that's like that, and it turned out fantastic. It just adds a lot more character to it than what you were able to do or what you anticipated it to end up looking like. So I did hang it just so that I can maintain its original form that I had set out to accomplish. Hopefully you can see now that this is dried, there are lots and lots of wrinkles. It's just added tons of texture to this, and it makes it look like I did a lot of extra work than what I really did. The paper towel just works wonders. It just ties everything together and just gives it that nasty overall appearance. And you probably can see what I was talking about earlier about what a great look the paper towel is just by itself. And I know one of these days I'm probably just going to layer this thing up on some type of project and just leave it that way, because I think it just looks fantastic on its own. You would have to layer it up quite a bit. I don't know if you can see. You can see the newspaper, the newsprint through it, but if you were to get a couple layers on it, I don't think you'd be able to see that at all. But it does give a real nice translucent appearance, and there's a lot of shadows and highlights just from the paper towel itself. Now that the structure's done, ready to go ahead and start with the painting process. One thing that I kind of discovered by accident and just fell in love with it as a coating, and I've used it on several projects now, most of which have all set outside for a full season or two and have had no issues whatsoever. Whether or not it's just from this or this and the combination of what else I do, I don't know, but I fell in love with it. I bought it on accident. Well, I didn't buy it on accident. I bought it for a different type of project, and it didn't work at all. And since I had it and had so much of it, I thought, what the heck, I have to paint these things black anyway, might as well use it. So my little secret ingredient that I have grown to absolutely love is nothing more than asphalt, sealer, and filler. And I do have to emphasize the filler. They do sell just an asphalt sealer, but the filler adds the additional, I don't know if it's sand or what the grittiness is that is applied to it in the container, but it just again adds just an additional layer of texture when you're applying it to any of these surfaces, and just absolutely love it. This stuff dries a flat black, so it works with anything that you need to coat anyway that you've got to get a flat black surface on, and it's cheap. This entire 5-gallon bucket was under $18, and it's going to last me for quite some time and provide a lot of products. So what we're going to do is we're going to give this a good coating with the sealer on the outside and the inside, and from there we'll let it dry and we'll be ready to paint. I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but this stuff is extremely thick. Goes on easy, just paint it like you normally would. I do have to point out that the only thing that I have found that this does work good on is anything that's porous, such as paper, wood, anything I guess that's organic. When it comes to plastic, it does not work. The original project was plastic, failed miserably and had to use something else. But obviously with any failure you end up gaining knowledge and being able to do something else with it. So glad I tried. Now that we've given it a generous coating of the driveway sealer and filler, we're going to go ahead and hang it up to dry overnight, and we'll be ready to paint from here. So again, works very well with anything organic such as paper, wood, what have you. And like I said, it was by accident that I ended up using it. I needed something to cover my initial coating black, and it was here, so I went ahead and used it, and it's just worked great. It's really easy to do. I was very generous with the coating, both the inside and out. And I know you won't be able to see it on camera, but if you were to look at this, there's now an additional texture over this. It's kind of a sandy texture over the entire thing. It just makes it look and gives that feel that this thing is truly an organic piece of pumpkin, believe it or not. But this is going to dry fairly quick, and it's going to dry very, very flat black. And I imagine that this stuff can be used for so many different projects. I've really just kind of touched on a very small aspect of what we could really use this for. So I've never seen or heard of anybody else using it. So hopefully that's a good tip that you guys can take away from this video. If there's anything else, or if there's nothing else that you do go away with, try this stuff out. It works great.